All right, so let's talk about Netflix. They've got a new show dealing with Jeffrey Dahmer. A lot of folks are watching, doing huge numbers. But then you also had some drama because you're dealing with Jeffrey Dahmer and subject matter, they place an LGBTQ tag on it. Well, that ticked off a lot of LGBTQ people. So then they hit Netflix, and then Netflix actually removed it from that particular category. Well, Jasmine Koenig and others, they were sitting here posting stuff, saying, hold up now, don't all of a sudden y'all don't want that to be included because just because it's bad. They said he was Jeffrey Dahmer, he was killing black people. Why in the world you don't want to take the tag off when in fact it actually is dealing with subject matter of someone who was gay? It's gotten backlash from the family of the victims. Now is also how someone was portrayed in the movie, who, of course, Dahmer, in terms of how he was portrayed, how folks he was targeting portrayed. So you still have all this controversy going on regarding this. Joining us now, Dr. Cleo Manago, the chief advisor of Black Men's Xchange, who also happened to be a pen pal of the man who murdered Dahmer in prison, Christopher Scarver. All right, Cleo, glad to see you. So first off, let's deal with this controversy over this removing of the tag. Black folks are like, hold up now, y'all don't want the tag, but it should apply. Don't say get it removed because it's a negative story. Your thoughts on that?
Well, like the story in LA, people who are racist do not like being associated with racism because it's publicly embarrassing and it's shameful, and they'd rather not be ashamed than not be racist. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So the white gay community is really good at protecting itself. It's a very powerful community, and it's real good at deflecting critique of it and the rampant racism that's always been in that community. I mean, similar to what happened with the victims of Dahmer, where there were people who were telling on Dahmer before he was finally locked up. Same thing with Ed Buck.
They were telling on Dahmer, and the cops were like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Not only that,
he could have been caught before very early.
Yeah. But he was a white male, so he had entitlement. A young Asian boy escaped, but he was delirious because Jeffrey Dahmer had put him under drugs, and they brought him back to Jeffrey Dahmer, who killed him minutes after the cops brought him back. But anyway, getting back to the LGBT deflection of being seen as racist, which is a fish deflecting being in the water, they did the same thing with Ed Buck. They never was a West Hollywood decree or outcry from the city politicians against the murder of black people. It was one last man who finally did not want to be identified, but said something, and then everything added up, and they had no choice. Similar to Holtzclaw, who was raping black women left and right. And you were the only person in the whole country when it first started buzzing to talk about it at all. And then the mainstream press didn't cover it at all until it got so far into the courts that they had to say something. So it's the same phenomena. It's the same thing. So, I keep telling folks that LGBTQ is the homosexual side of white supremacy systemology. It's not just a free rainbow waving phenomena. It's a white phenomena.
Let's talk about Christopher Scarver. You sent me an email with regards to this film. Said you were writing him, and so just share with us what you say the film got wrong.
Okay.
Based upon your relationship with him and your direct conversations with him.
Well, yes, I was a pen pal with Christopher Scarver from about 2005, I think, to 2009.
How did that happen?
I wrote The Prison.
So you just said, okay. Now after, after the fact, you just said,
well,
let me just write this dude.
Well, let me give a little context. I was fascinated by this whole thing when Dahmer was alive. The whole thing occurred, and when I first heard about the murders in Milwaukee, I assumed they were black. They hadn't even said it on the media. They talked about the murders, but they didn't racialize them yet. And as a matter of fact, I got to fights with people who said, you always think about race. I said, these are black men because you don't get away with killing that many people now unless they're not white. Anyway, when he finally got into prison and was alive, I went to Wisconsin. This is before I even heard of Christopher Scarver. I went to Wisconsin to do some research on the whole phenomena, and that's a whole nother story that would take a lot of time. But once Christopher Scarver murdered Dahmer, he also murdered another person. Well, I'm using the word murder because you said murdered. I use the word executed. So I'm gonna use my own phrase. I'm using my own phraseology here. Young in his 20s, he was in his mid-20s, young black male Christopher Scarver executed 2 white men who had been trouble to black men. He murdered, excuse me, there you got me messing up again. He executed.
Don't be blaming it on me, you talking.
It's not your fault. Anyway, he executed Jeffrey Dahmer, and then he tipped over to the other side of the room and executed Jesse Anderson. Now, you know who Jesse Anderson was, right?
No.
Okay, well, Jesse Anderson, also in the same state, killed his wife, called the cops, and claimed that 2 black men were running from his home, and he made one of those drawings made of 2 black men, and then they did a forensic investigation, found that he killed his wife.
So he blamed black people.
He blamed black people, and what happens in police departments when there's a black fugitive, whether they did anything or not, is that black men are harassed. Black men back in the 90s, up until recently, are killed because white folks are mad about what supposedly black men have done, and they're arrested when they didn't do anything wrong. So Scarver was clear about the fact that Jeffrey Dahmer and Jesse Anderson had ruined the lives of black men. And one of the things that Jeffrey was doing, and he told me this, was Jeffrey would go to lunch and put gravy on mashed potatoes so they can look like black people and put ketchup on them and eat them and giggle. So Christopher Scarver said, no, not under my watch, we're not having this. So he asked, could he go help and clean, because they got cleaning duty. And he said, I want to help, which was nothing that he had done before, but he had a plan. So he did cleaning duty, and he did clean. He cleaned 2 racist, crazy, twisted, murdering white men off the planet. Now, getting back to the Netflix film, what they're doing, and let me preface that with a phenomenon called drapetomania. Are you familiar with drapetomania?
No.
Okay. Well, drapetomania was discovered by a dude named Dr. Samuel Cartwright in the 1800s, who called black people who ran away from white people or who resisted white supremacy, they were considered crazy. Drapetomania was a legal mental illness diagnosis of black people who ran away or who resisted. And there was treatments. It was usually brutal, beaten, murder, and all that kind of stuff. Well, I bring that up just because just like when David Chappelle didn't take that several million dollars and went away, they said he was crazy, that he had lost his mind. Well, getting back to Mr. Scarver, in this film, they make it seem like he had a eureka moment from God and that God told him to do this. They don't even mention the racial piece. Now, when he was 21, he was interviewed and he said, whatever white people do to black people is never just. He had a critical analysis of racism. And he told me himself that he killed them because of what they did to black men, but Netflix doesn't mention any of that. They make it look like, they also mention, like they did with David Chappelle, that he was on medication and that he was taking mental illness.
Meaning Scarver.
Scarver. And that this whole thing was just him being mentally ill.
And you're like, no, he was real clear.
No, he was real clear.
On what he was doing.
I mean, let's look at it logically. The correctional center was full of rapists and murderers. Why would he choose these? What you mean it had nothing to do with race? But my point is that they're always trying to deflect and abstract and actually get rid of, if they can, the fact that somebody is rebelling against white supremacy, particularly on these levels. So I called you guys because I said, look, this is a popular show. Everybody's talking about it. I want more people to know that this illogical religious focus or religious zealot focus that Netflix has written into this film about Christopher Scarver is mythological. I was literally called by one of the consultants to Netflix to talk to them about what happened because they knew I knew a lot about the real story.
Now this was before. This was before it was done.
This is before it was done.
So as they were making this this documentary or show, whatever it's called,
series.
So they reached out to you,
right?
And then what happened?
Well, I brought it up because I told them this. I told them what I'm telling you, and
they chose not to go that route.
And I talked about, which is deep, we don't got time to get into it, but how some of the same gender-loving black men, and they weren't all same gender-loving, people need to know that, Some of them were not. But many of the men who wound up in the lair of Jeffrey Dahmer thought that going to white people was a sanctuary from black pain. And going into the arms of whites was a place to go where they were guaranteed to be safe compared to simply being black.
And he ended up dead.
And they became lunch.
Last time you communicated with Scarver?
Oh, it's been about 2009. For some reason, he was put into solitary confinement. He's now in Colorado, but I haven't been able to talk to him in a while. I used to send him money and stamps, and I want to say why, so there's some context there. He was a hero, frankly, in my perspective, for getting Dahmer and getting Anderson. And I don't go around murdering folks. I haven't murdered anyone, and I don't necessarily recommend it. But my point is that he did it. He had a critical analysis. He was intolerant of people's acceptance of Dahmer and Jesse Anderson, and that from his perspective, particularly Dahmer, who was making a joke about it, that it needed to be put to an end. And I agreed with that. But I want people to think I'm a murderer and, go around. I mean, there's lots of murderers in jail, but I've only talked to Christopher Scarver because of his significance. He murdered a mass murdering, cannibalizing white dude who was eating innocent black men, some who thought because he was white, they were safe. And he killed Jesse Anderson, who lied and said that his wife was murdered by two black men, and then they forensically studied it and found that he did it. But until they found that out, numbers of black men were harassed, likely beat up. You know about police brutality, because now they got an excuse. And Mr. Christopher Scarver, who was only like 25, said, well, not under my watch, you won't be doing that no more.
Scarver spent 16 years in solitary.
Yeah.
16. So
that's what happens when you kill not just one white man, but two.
So you haven't talked to him, but you send him money, send him stamps.
Well, I haven't done any of that in a while.
Right.
I mean,
so you haven't able to even have you written letters to him at that prison in Colorado?
No.
And just none returned?
No.
When was the last time y'all communicated?
In 2009. Yeah, 2009. And I think he was moved or something. I mean, I don't know what happened, but I was, of course, disappointed about the whole thing. But before I leave, I want to mention to you one more thing. Have you ever heard of Ronald Dominique?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, y'all go on Google and look up Dominique. Dominique has killed more black men than Dahmer. They call him the Bayou Monster or something like that. And he's a white homosexual male who also used white skin and whatever else he could pimp to lure black men and other men, but predominantly black men, into his lair. And he also slaughtered and killed a number of black men. And he was a white gay man. So there's others. And as I've told you some time ago when we interviewed about Ed Buck, the subjugation, humiliation, and compromise of black people, male and female, but in this instance, black male, is not as unusual as we would like to think. Now I want to get into solutions. I want to make sure I do that before I leave here. Black people have got to create invitational, safe space to talk about our diversity, to create an opportunity to talk about our diversity regarding sexuality and gender, and make it safe to be all that we are in the company of other black people. Because one of the reasons why there are black people who will go into the queer, gay, etc. movement is because they feel like they can't do that as freely, if you will, in predominantly black spaces. So they go to white spaces for sanctuary. We have to start making black places be where all of us can go for sanctuary. I'm not talking about agreeing with everybody, because you have to have conversations about all of this, but we have to make it safe, emotionally safe, to be with each other. Because then people like Dahmer and Dominique and Buck and the ones who haven't made it to prime time yet won't have so much fodder to manipulate and murder.
You talked about Dominique. Here it says he killed 21.
That they know about. See, that's important, that they know about. Just like they don't know all of Dahmer's victims that they know about.
Yeah.
Ed Buck, that they know about. Because they're really good, because they can walk around in plain daylight without looking like a suspect, because they're white You can't do that, and I certainly can't walk around all the time being to look innocent. Oh, he looks so innocent. I mean, they don't say that about people who look like me, but they say that about people who look like Ed Buck. They say that people look like Jeffrey Dahmer, and they say that people like Dominique. But most of the serial killers and people who do this horrendous crap look like those three people. But prototypically in the U.S. psyche, you and I look more like we're gonna go eating on somebody.
Wow. Well, that is again one hell of a story. Like I said, when you hit me up, I was like, I said, well, definitely got to get Cleo on and talk about it, because again, what happens is when people see these specials, when they see these movies, documentaries, well, what ends up happening is they think what they are seeing is the 100% truth.
Based on a true story.
Yep.
But I'm reiterating that they edit out things that, well, might take black people out of what I call the white supremacy trauma trance and be awake and alert and able to navigate and deflect past all of these implications of anti-blackness in the culture and stay intact. And they didn't want black people to hear about a black man who killed two white men because they had murdered black men. So they claim he lost his mind, he was hearing voices, or he was crazy, and that's why he did it. But no, he was and he has a very high IQ. Christopher Scarver is a brilliant man. I don't say that because he killed somebody. I'm saying that because of his intellect. When I spoke to him and I'm talking with, we were hanging because he's extremely smart.
All right. Cleo, we appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. All right, y'all. All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?